Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Food COMA, Conversations Over Meals in America. I'm your host, Cynthia. For those of you who are new to the podcast, again, this is a podcast that celebrates diversity and hopes to connect communities. So we have wonderful conversations with people of different backgrounds, and I have a wonderful guest with me today. It's Miss Priya.
Hello.
She's so delightful, and you will definitely enjoy her for today's conversation over meals in America. Again, this is sponsored by Key Spot, and Key Spot is all about connecting communities where you can find deals, discounts, services, and events all in one Key Spot. Just go to the Key Spot app at www.keyspotapp.com. All right, Priya, so let us go ahead and start with the food. Oh my goodness, this is so delicious. So you brought several things today. So let's see, you brought some rice and chicken biryani, is that it?
It is. So, when you asked me to bring a meal to share with you, a dish you said.
Yes.
I thought, one dish doesn't cut it.
Yes.
When we get together and connect over food.
Mm-hmm.
More food, more variety.
The more the better.
More the better, and it makes the conversation more fun.
Yes.
So I brought some biryani for you that has some herbs, some spices. It's basically rice that's flavored with spices and added vegetables to it. You've got vegetables like cauliflower and green peas. And then I also bought for you a chicken dish called shish kebab chicken.
Oh, yes.
Which is
so good.
Which is marinated ground chicken that's cooked in a clay oven, which is called a tandoor. And you top that off, as you have so well, with some yogurt.
Yep, the yogurt. I'm about to choke because I'm eating so good. But the yogurt sets off the flavors.
It absolutely does. And it also helps if something is too spicy. It calms down, calms the spice down. It balances out.
Yeah, and this is not too spicy at all. It's very, very tasty. So we were just joking around today about the yogurt and how even though it's culturally part of the meal, you're not a big fan of yogurt, huh?
No. So the honest, when you talk about yogurt in the Indian culture, where I grew up, we eat yogurt with every meal.
Right.
And yogurt is, we know now in the Western culture that's catching up, right? We talk about it being good antibodies and eating all the good bacteria. It's a staple meal, part of the meal. In the Indian culture. And ever since I was a baby, from the first bite of yogurt my mom fed me, I didn't eat it. And they tried for about 14 years of my life.
Oh no, they thought you would change.
They did. They just, they'd put sugar and they would try to mix it in something and they would force me to eat it.
Right.
You can't leave the table till you eat it. It didn't stick.
Okay.
So
no yogurt for you.
No yogurt for me. So I truly am still born in India, and I am Indian, even though I don't like yogurt.
So the other item that I had made was tilapia.
Very tasty, by the way.
Thank you. So I'm trying to eat lighter. As I mentioned before, the holidays just wrapped up. A New Year's resolution. So trying to eat healthy. So we have tilapia lightly cooked. And then also white rice. So it's a nice combination. We have rice on rice. So this is so good. And you were just mentioning your background, India. So tell us more about where you grew up.
So my formative years were spent in Mumbai, India.
Okay.
Which I like to call Bombay because that's what's on my birth certificate, They did change the name several years ago because the British had given us our name and they went back to more traditional Indian name.
Oh, okay.
But I spent about 20 years in India and then moved to Cincinnati about 25 years ago. And so, I often say when people say, where's home?
Right.
Cincinnati's home because I've spent more time here in this country than I have in my own birth country.
Right.
And so, it's home and my entire family's here.
Yeah. You know how they say home is where the heart is.
Absolutely.
So anywhere could be home. Yeah.
That's right. I'm here today, so I'm feeling very, very at home. So thank you for the hospitality.
Of course. So glad to have you. So you were born in India and then you moved to Cincinnati. So what brought you to Cincinnati?
Well, I feel like it's a story of a lot of immigrants, but my Dad's family, my dad's siblings, migrated here in the 60s and 70s during the Nixon era. And they went to school here, became professionals, and started their families here. All my cousins, except for one, were born in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
So my dad was the third son out of 7 kids.
Oh, that's a lot of kids.
Yeah, a lot of kids. I know, back in the day, right? And so his older brother's daughter was, and my sister and I are the only 3 grandkids out of about 17 that were born in India.
Oh.
And so the plan was always that we would move here at some point. Just the whole immigration process took a little longer than we had anticipated.
Oh, I hear
So it was here to come, be with family. And so, ever since I was probably about 3 or 4 years old, enough to understand.
Right.
We were told that we would be moving to the U.S.
Right.
And the process just took a little longer than planned.
Yeah,
and
but you made it.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it would have been the same journey if I would have been here at the age of 5.
Right.
As being in my 20s, coming here, as I often like to put it, with no degree.
Okay.
With no marketable skills. And having to truly start from ground up.
Wow. Ooh, I'd love to hear that journey. So what was your ground up start? Like, once you moved to Cincinnati, what did you do?
So what was interesting was, as my parents so I came here on a green card because we were, we came through that family connection. And so my parents kind of went back and forth for 3 years trying to decide what they wanted to do. And my dad was not ready to move because my dad had an established business in India.
Right.
So we were not really moving here because of any, the fact that we didn't have things or we needed more.
Right.
It was just part of our family was and what we were going to be doing. An opportunity, right? In essence, land of opportunity. And so when the decision was made that we would move here, my sister and I would join my mother. My dad stayed back in India because he didn't want to move here. And he
had businesses there.
He did. So he was settled. He was in his 50s. He was settled. He didn't want to start all over again.
Right.
So when I came here, my sister was 17, so she went to high school. And instead of going to college, I realized that I needed to become the head of household with my mom because my mom alone, working as a bank teller at that point, couldn't really financially support us. And so I found a job and my first job was working at Fifth Third Bank, downtown Cincinnati.
Yes, wonderful.
And it was a job that really taught me a lot because what I did for a living for about the first 9 months of my life in Cincinnati was worked in the basement of the building, of the tower, and made sure every check had a signature.
Wow.
So back in the day, dating ourselves, right, 25 years,
That's all right.
Forget technology, right? Any check that was over $5,000 and were of a certain business account would come downstairs and it would be manually verified for signatures. And I made sure...
So that was a security process.
Exactly. Okay. And I made sure all day, every day that I was sorting checks.
Wow.
That was my job title, in essence, a check sorter. So it was a humble beginning because
But it was an important job.
Oh, it was a very important job.
Yes.
But, I made $5 an hour. And, we still recall as we, rented our apartment, we had one car between the 3 of us. We furnished our entire apartment through Goodwill.
Right.
Went to Goodwill and bought winter clothes because I didn't have winter clothes. And we still, as a family, talk about that. Even going back to food, right? We would eat at home to save money.
Right.
But then when we would say, Mom, we really want to go out for dinner, we would go to Taco Bell and get tostadas and, spend $5 or $6.
Right.
And it was a luxury.
Yeah. And that was enough to feed everybody.
Yeah. And so I say that because in contrast to growing up, I had a very privileged life. We grew up in India as middle to upper class, where I would say, Dad, can I have the car keys? He would hand me the car keys and money and say, here's gas money and food money.
Oh, nice.
Your curfew.
Right.
So going from that to now saying, Mom, can we please go to Taco Bell?
Right.
And not even ordering a drink. We would drink water because we were so conscious. Of where we were.
Being able to see both sides is a great opportunity because that kind of molds you in life. Because if you are someone who only sees things one way, for instance, if you entirely grew up upper middle class, high end, then that would be all you knew, and just think about all the people that you might not have met, all the experiences you might have missed out on learning from because of your opportunity to kind of see things from a different perspective. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it also makes you appreciate things.
Exactly. You do
right?
appreciate an honest work and working hard for everything you get. And the luxuries that you have makes it even more better.
It does. And to me, that truly ties to gratitude.
Yeah.
Being grateful.
Right.
Again, we work hard,
Mm-hmm.
but there are a lot of folks around the way that help us, mentor us.
Right.
And it's the gratitude component. And I try really hard. I have a 10-year-old, who's living a privileged life, as I'm going to put it, in essence, compared to, again, my story of where I was 25 years ago.
Right.
And, I talk about this very often with her on how just are going out and spending $5 or $6 on, on a meal was a big deal.
Yeah.
As compared to now saying, let's just go to Grader's.
Right.
And you don't think about what it takes when you have 4 people going to Grader's.
Right.
It's a lot more than $5 these days, right?
It's true.
So it's perspective.
Yeah. So just to tell the story about how we met not too long ago. We're both entrepreneurs. And we were at a conference, and we happened to sit right next to each other.
Meant to be.
It was meant to be, because you are a diversity professional. Are you a diversity coach? What exactly is the title you'd like to go by?
Well, so I am a variety of things, as I like to joke, right? But my consulting practice really focuses on the areas of cross-cultural competence, which is the diversity world through the lenses of a skill, as well as change management and talent development.
Right.
But all related with human psyche, behavior, what motivates us, how do we engage with each other, and what stops us from really having these authentic conversations with each other.
Exactly. So what kind of drove you to that career path? What was your interest that motivated you to go there?
So I often joke, we all have a calling in life, we all have a purpose in life.
Right.
Some of us find it, some of us just fall into it. I think for me it was a combination of things. I think my entire life journey has been always about seeking to understand.
Right. You're curious.
I have naturally always been curious.
Oh, great.
My mom tells the story of since I was a kid, I'd always ask why. I ask a lot of why questions.
Right.
And, I always connected dots and questioned whatever was considered status quo. Whether it was through the lenses of religion, whether it was through the lenses of girls don't do this or girls do that. I always wanted to know the why.
Right.
And if I could understand it, I was okay with it. If I couldn't understand it, I'd sit back and kind of sort of question it.
Yeah, say why again until
or disagree. And let's be honest, at least in my culture growing up in India, you didn't do that with your elders.
Oh.
Right? You listened to your elders, you respected your elders.
Okay.
You know how some cultures we earn respect. In other cultures, you're just given respect based on your title.
Wow.
And so in the Indian culture, we respect our elders. And respect is a good thing.
Right.
But respect, the way it shows up is that if you're asked to do something by your elders, you do it because they're your elders.
Right.
You don't question it. Right. And I believe that, but at the same time, when things don't sit right, question it. So I say that to say,
tradition is not always the right path.
Absolutely. Because traditions are embedded in certain data points.
Right.
And environments change, data points change.
Right.
And so traditions are important. But every now and then we got to look back at our traditions and question.
And ask why,
Right? And are they still relevant today?
Exactly.
Because they may not be. Because things around us have changed and we don't realize it.
That is true.
Right? So I feel like, again, as I'm answering your question, right, it's always been my calling. And so I dabbled in my corporate life doing organization development, soft skill training. It was always about the building bridges. Right? And then I landed up into this field of culture and talking about cultural similarities and differences. And as I took a step back, I realized that's what I had been calling all my life.
Right.
And so, the journey I'm on, as I often say, I think some of us sometimes we're on this journey.
Right.
Because we need it the most. Right?
Oh, that's interesting.
So you kind of work on things, then you tell others what you need to hear sometimes. So
and if you're saying it out loud because you're really helping yourself.
See?
Yeah.
Part of the reinforcement, right?
Oh, I love that theory there. So you've done a lot of workshops, is that correct?
Yeah, so My consulting practice, I do workshops, I do strategy work, I do coaching. So that's why I joked when you said, "How do you like to call yourself?" I'm like, well, I'm a facilitator, I'm a mentor. But for me, really, at the core, what I enjoy doing is just engaging with people at a human level.
Right.
And for me, that what I mean by that human level, is just sitting down and having a conversation.
Right.
That's why I so love just sitting over a meal today, having this
Yes.
conversation with you.
Yes.
Because
Thank you.
it's the authentic part of this. It's a relationship. It's a connection.
Yeah.
And it's just, being with each other.
So in the corporate world, how do you get people to open up when you do your sessions?
Depending on the clients I'm working with.
Right.
Often, it's not just the culture we bring to the table, like what makes us who we are.
Right.
It's also the organizational culture. Right? How does an organization operate?
Right.
What are the unwritten rules and practices? So when I go into an organization, one of the first things I try to do is better understand their culture, right? Like, how do people operate?
So how do you do that?
Often it's a variety of ways, depending on the type of work I'm doing.
Okay.
Sometimes it's as I'm engaging early on, just trying to scope the work product out. I observe a lot. I ask a lot of questions about how does this organization or this group deal with hierarchy? What are the kind of the dynamics of the team? So I ask a lot of questions, again, going back to my curiosity. But then when I'm in a room, because I don't always have the luxury of having data beforehand.
Right.
But if I'm in a room and as I'm working with the team, within probably the first 10 to 15 minutes, as I'm just saying good morning to folks,
Right.
I can get a good feel of if people are walking in closed or if people are walking in open to receive.
Just body language. Is that what you're reading?
Because when somebody walks in and you greet them, just like when somebody comes to your home, right? And you greet them, you welcome them in.
Yes.
You set the tone.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I do and I love doing is obviously want to make sure the room's set up. But as people are coming in, I'll introduce myself, shake hands, or just say good morning, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But try to engage.
Okay.
And, very quickly I can kind of gauge on how many, even if something simple as how many extroverts I got in the room versus how many introverts I got in the room.
Wow, you were good at reading the room.
It's a gift and a curse sometimes. But, and then the other thing is as I get into activities, because I do a lot of work experientially, so a lot of activities, of whether it's self-reflection, group work, I often pick up on the culture when I try to do a large group debrief.
Okay.
If I'm doing a large group debrief and everybody is just staring back at me, there's about a 90+% chance that there's low trust in the room.
And they're doing it because they have to.
Yes, and the group is concerned or minimized in a way where they're afraid to share a perspective because what happens if it's only their perspective and nobody else in the room gets it? However, often with those groups, when they're in small groups and they're paired with someone, you hear lots of energy, lots of chatter.
Oh yeah.
Second, we come back as a large group and I say, okay, now let's talk about what you did.
Right.
Everybody stares back like, what's she talking about?
Oh, they don't want to share.
That's where you realize what the organizational culture is.
Oh, wow.
Right? So then I find ways on either, depending on, again, how I'm engaging with folks. And I call it out. I'm one of those, I love calling out elephants in the room.
So I do have a question on that. Is there usually management or leadership in the room and that's why the people don't want to have those conversations?
It varies.
Okay.
In some cases there is hierarchy in the room. In other cases it may be individuals at the same level. Might be different parts of different organizations, like different departments.
Okay. And they might not know each other.
And sometimes it's not even so much is not knowing as much as I think in most organizations we want to be able to fit in. And so one of the things that I observe is that we operate from a place of minimization.
Okay.
Where we have a tendency as a society in general to focus on similarities and ignore the differences. So we act like the differences don't exist because we don't talk about them.
Oh, wow.
Right? So what happens then is that just doesn't impact behavior, like how I show up or how I can engage with you.
Right.
It even shows up on how I share my thoughts with you. Because what happens if I say something to you and you judge me?
Oh, then you feel bad and you don't want to share anymore.
Because now I'm feeling judged.
Yes.
And guess what? I move into a group, now you're my boss. You know this about me.
Oh, yeah.
Right? What happens if you hold it against me?
Oh, yeah.
So we minimize differences.
Okay.
And that's part of why organizations that are working on creating innovation cultures struggle.
Okay.
Because innovation requires us to be bold.
That's true.
speak our mind, and maybe put something out that may not be very popular.
Right. And
So-
people are afraid to stand out. Ah!
Full circle.
Wow. This is interesting.
Yeah. So, you know, when I do diversity work, let me just be honest, right? As you think about our country and our history,
Yeah.
race, I think, will always bubble up to the top and be a big part of our conversation,
Right.
rightfully so.
Right.
It's in our history. We can't ignore it. We can't walk away from it.
That's true.
As I continue to do this work, and especially when I go into organizations where they say, we don't have a lot of racial, ethnic diversity. Happens. I still walk into rooms where there isn't any.
Right.
My thought process is that if we're looking at this conversation of diversity through the lenses of a skill, how do I bridge across a difference?
Okay.
And I broaden it and look at it as that difference could show up in any form.
Okay.
Right? So as I joked about the yogurt example of being Indian, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, even though if I'm in India or I'm with my family,
Right.
that's an element of diversity.
Uh-huh.
Like they'll call it out every now and then, right?
They'll teach you.
It sounds, and again,
Yeah.
it sounds silly, right, as we just
Right.
look at that. But
Yeah.
the point I want to make there is, when we think about culture, we could be with people that look just like us, and there is still diversity at play. And so, the work I do, I look at it through the lenses of a skill and a competency. So if we're with our family members and a difference shows up, whether it's on a political lens or whether it's on religion or
Right.
parenting or whatever the topic might be, what do we do with the difference?
Right.
Do we ignore it? Do we address it?
So maybe part of what you're doing is helping people cultivate and use that diversity to the advantage of maybe the corporation and say, oh, I noticed this person has this talent that's unique to them, bringing this diversity to the company.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, because as you know, I'm sure from your corporate experience as well, right?
Right.
That we say we want diversity. We bring in people with diverse backgrounds, right? So there might be racial, generational diversity, all those other elements.
Right.
But then when we bring them into the majority culture, then we say, you know what, your behavior doesn't work here.
Oh.
You need to start acting like everybody else.
Oh.
Or you spoke up in a meeting. You know we don't speak up in a meeting here.
Yeah.
You gotta just wait your turn.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that happened to me in my corporate life.
Oh, yeah.
In a large Fortune 500 company, I was once told that I needed to spend 5 years observing, learning, and understanding. And after 5 years, I would have all the credibility I needed. And as I joked with our C-suite leader who was coaching me with that advice,
Yeah.
how was I gonna add value?
Right.
For
If you
5
couldn't
years.
speak up.
And I'm like, but you brought me in for my ideas.
Right.
And the diversity of thought, diversity of
Yes.
experience.
Yes.
And yes, diversity of my race and my ethnicity.
Right.
What value am I adding?
Yeah,
And-
if I can't say it.
and
say these things. Yeah.
And the mindset was, well, you need to learn our culture first. So if you put your head down and you just learn our culture, then 5 years you have credibility. But in 5 years, I would not be myself anymore.
Right.
I would be part of that culture.
So how do you go in to companies who have that mindset? So maybe perhaps they are offering your services because they want to check a box.
Yes. Oh.
How do you go into a company and help them make changes when they don't even realize they have an issue?
Great question. You know, again, going back to asking a lot of questions. And for me, what I often like to do is, you know, I look at this conversation of diversity, talent development, change management, right? When we talk about the human development side of things.
Right.
Through the lenses of how do we tie it to the bottom line?
Of course.
So when I go into organizations like that, often that's one of the first questions I ask is, so help me understand, why am I here?
That's
Right?
good. You're straightforward.
What do you know, is this a checkbox?
Right.
Or you know, give me some insights.
Right.
And often, depending on the organization, I get a straight answer. Sometimes I don't. But, you know, for me, then the next question often becomes is, what are we working on from a business perspective today? If you look at our business goals, what are the pain points?
Right.
And at least in my experience, about 70 to 80% of the time, when you look at organizational business goals, whether it's growth, retention, engagement,
Right.
right, capturing additional markets, you can really create a direct correlation to diversity,
Okay.
right? So if you're trying to get into new market, you need diversity of thought.
Right.
You need diversity of race or ethnicity if they're new cultural, or ethnic markets. You need the intel.
Right, and based off their goals, these are some ways they can get there by expanding the people and their pool of people within the company.
Absolutely. And let me just be kind of honest here. You know, we often talk, for years we've talked about diversity being the right thing to do. And it is. However, we as human beings, just for what it's worth, like you joked about the holidays and eating, right? We know what we should be doing, but we don't always do the right thing.
Right.
Right? Like we know all the candy and all the pies we ate over the holidays.
Yes.
We're not the smartest decisions. Right?
But that's what the holidays are for.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we know better.
Yes.
Right? So that's, as I joke, right? So we are wired a certain way that we can rationalize things. Right? So I say that to say I don't look at this work through the lens of the right thing to do. Because to me that's a given.
Okay.
It's like eating right or sleeping right or pick whatever you want. Right? It's if you're able to tie it to an outcome. Right? So when we talk about eating right, we're tying it to an outcome because we want to feel good.
Right.
We want to fit back into the clothes we wore before the holidays. Right? We want to live longer.
Yeah.
That's kind of the what's in it for us.
Exactly.
Right? So for organizations, it's the what's in it for them. And what do they want to do? Most organizations want to sustain the business.
Right.
They want to grow the business. They want
to
good
expand
return
their market.
Yeah, they want a good return on investment.
Yes.
And so if we can connect the dots and say, yeah, it's the right thing to do, but you're still not seeing it. You still want to eat brownies every day.
Short-lived life, short-lived business.
How do we make it work? Well, you can maybe eat a bite of a brownie every day, but let's
get some Brussels sprouts in there, get some cauliflower.
Maybe dip your Brussels sprouts in chocolate fondue
there you go.
every day, right? But at least you're balancing it out. It's, you know, what I find fascinating is all the financial analysts and everybody will talk about diversifying our portfolios, right? As we think about retirement.
Yes.
It baffles me that we can look at diversifying through those lenses.
Economic lenses,
right? Of stock market and mutual funds and all those lovely things.
Right.
Why is it so difficult?
Yeah.
To look at it through the lenses that even our talent needs to be diverse.
Exactly.
Right? Across just about any dimension you want to pick. As we look at today's generational differences in the workforce, it's a big part of our conversation.
Right.
How do we retain talent?
Yeah, that's important right there, retaining the talent as well. Yeah, and then the culture, making sure that the culture helps fit the needs of the people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's where that balance comes in is, you know, how do we create a culture from a perspective that it's adaptive enough, that we hold on to what we may consider as our fundamental values.
Right.
But as long as our values are not impacting others negatively, right? So and it's not that I should give up my values, it's just do I recognize how my values might impact you. And if you and I continue to work together, are there ways that without sacrificing my core values, I can adjust my behavior so we can still benefit from each other? Yeah, right? And it's not like one way is better than the other as much as how do we create adaptive cultures in our organization where we cannot, it's not just that we react to the markets to be adaptive, right? What the markets are doing, but also how do we give...
We want stability.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
And things are changing, right? I mean, things are constantly changing. So how do we, you know, create a path in such a way that there's enough movement left and right?
So outside of the corporate world, how have you been able to take your talents and diversity and coaching to help maybe communities or others, or what are some things that you have seen? I mean, Cincinnati is a place where it's full of people with different backgrounds, which is wonderful. But it's also based off of, you know, historically, we have the east side, we have the west side, we have the inner city. So there's some divided, and then we have the rural areas as well. So there's some divisions and compartmentalized areas. What are your thoughts as far as how we can bring people together? And what are some things that you might have done?
I appreciate you asking that question because that's, you know, it feels near and dear to my heart. So I have been very fortunate that I have been working with the Cincinnati Chamber, Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber, for the last about 5 years now. I started off as a volunteer, now I've been working with them. So our Cincinnati Chamber has been kind of spearheading and pushing in making Cincinnati and making this region, as they like to call it, more sticky for talent.
Yes.
And so some of your listeners, and you might have heard of the initiative Diverse by Design.
Yes.
And so one of the things that has come out of that initiative is a program called Cultural Competence Program for Leaders.
Oh, wonderful.
And it's a program that we have had 2 pilot sessions so far.
Okay.
And what we're in the middle of right now is looking at how do we take this program to scale.
Mm-hmm.
So let me tell you a little bit about the program. And
Okay.
so, because I think this ties directly to your question about how do we impact and influence our communities to become more inclusive. Even though we know this may not change overnight, right? When we look at our neighbors and how we
Right.
look at the different parts of our city,
Right.
but how we as a city can become more inclusive
Yes.
with each other, more accepting
Right.
of differences. So this program really is, it's a community, the impact, and kind of the audacious goal is that we would have leaders from the community go through this program. And when we use the term leaders, we're not saying corporate leaders,
Okay.
as it happens traditionally.
Right.
We're talking maybe the president of a local PTA.
Okay.
We're talking maybe a den mom.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking a pastor at a
Right,
church
right.
that may say, I'm going to take my congregation. I'm going to go through this journey, and then I want to take my congregation through this
Oh,
journey.
that's wonderful.
So,
kind of expanding it. Yeah.
absolutely. So Mary Stagman from the Chamber uses the analogy of, the ripples in a pond, right? And so the participants of this program would go through this journey where they would really get an opportunity to reflect on their own culture,
Okay.
look at through some assessments that I facilitate on how do they bridge across differences, get some data points and insights from local experts. So the way this program is designed is it's over 6 sessions, and we have local consultants that come in and share their perspectives and their expertise. And my role in the program so far, as we piloted the 2 groups, has been to be the constant facilitator throughout.
Right.
So I kind of work with the team and kind of pull them and push them along the way. And we've piloted the program with about 52 leaders in our community between 2 cohorts.
Okay.
With some great results.
Wow.
Because we're using a tool that is a validated tool. So we measure them as they come in, their
Right.
cultural competence level,
Okay.
and then we measure their cultural competence level at the end.
Okay.
So we can see the growth.
Wow.
And
Are there exercises in between?
it's all experiential.
Okay.
It's all experiential. So they meet for about 4 hours, and
Each session?
each session is
Okay,
about
so
4
24
hours.
hours is
Yeah,
the
give or as I do,
series.
give or take, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so we do the pre-assessment. They get a coaching session with me. Then they get the 6 sessions, and the sessions are really more interactive.
Okay.
So we have reflection time, we have pairing opportunities,
Right.
and we have small group and large group discussions.
Oh, wow, that's great.
And the discussions are not so much from a perspective of listening sessions, often where we get into listening sessions.
Yeah.
These activities and conversations are based in skill and competencies,
Okay.
right? Because when we think about preferences, we all have preferences,
Okay.
right? And so when a difference shows up, how do I deal with that difference?
Okay.
So it's a skill that I can learn to adapt.
Okay.
If you don't communicate like I do, I can sit back and just say, oh, she doesn't know how to communicate. Or I can take a step back and say, Cynthia's got a different style than I do.
Right.
How do I need to connect with?
Right.
So it's skill building. And so there are activities.
Oh, that's great.
And so we are in the middle of, like I said, working with our community leaders. It's a community-based program that was put together with input from our community members.
Okay.
And so we are currently talking about how to take it to scale where we can have in the first session maybe 500
Wow.
leaders from the community
Yes.
as a cohort, and then create sub-cohorts, and then start to create it as a movement in our city.
I love it. And then eventually there could be chapters across the United States.
Oh, let's make that happen.
Yes,
I'm talking about
that. Because I'm always trying to find what are things that are out there, that programs that are available for people where they can help build connections. we know diversity is when people come together with different backgrounds, but if there are people who don't have exposure to people of different backgrounds, then how do we connect them?
Absolutely.
So when we have these programs in place, and that gives people opportunities if they're interested.
Oh, absolutely. And
Yeah.
you know, I think what's unique about this program is, at least in my experience, and this could just be my worldview, is sometimes we come together, and you know, on the surface it looks like we're connecting, right?
Right.
You look around the room and you're like, wow, look at the diversity.
Right.
But what we miss is that each of us is sitting in our own corner, only looking at the situation from our lens and our culture and our worldview.
Right.
So I'm still sitting here judging you just as much as I did before I walked in here.
Right.
Right? So nothing changes. Because when I leave, I don't have a deeper understanding of you, right? As compared to if you're looking at it through the lenses of a skill and a competency, and you're recognizing that not everybody sees the world the way you do.
Yeah, that's true.
Then
and you give people the tools to recognize.
Then you meet them differently.
I like the example that you just gave where you talked about communication.
Yes.
And you kind of flipped it to say, oh, she communicates differently. Because otherwise, without having that skill, people would think, oh, well, she just can't talk. She's just loud or whatever. Have that initial thought about someone instead of, oh, they just do things differently. Let me adjust the way I speak in order for us to be able to communicate better. I like that. Giving people those tools.
Right? And to that point, you know, it's not that one person needs to do it and the other doesn't.
Right.
So it's mutual adaptation. How do I adapt to you?
But recognizing you need to adapt.
Absolutely.
That's step one.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then helping others along, right?
Yeah,
Just calling it out and recognizing.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, again, I like to go back to my, you know, a lot of what I do is embedded in recognizing my experience in the corporate world. And, you know, getting performance appraisals that say, well, you're too passionate. And I'm like, well, what's that supposed to mean?
Right, yes.
You
Why
know?
is that on there in the first
When
place?
does passion become a bad thing?
Exactly.
Oh, you mean I'm expressive when I communicate. I use my hands when I communicate, as compared to my peers who are more emotionally restrained. Right? And it's not a good or bad, right or wrong.
Right.
It's different.
It's different.
And different is not bad.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be bad.
Right.
Yeah, so this is awesome. Okay, so we're going to get ready to wrap it up a little bit.
Sure.
But I just want to ask, so what do you think about the idea of the podcast, Conversation, Food Coma, Conversations Over Meals in America, all about, you know, diversity and celebrating and bringing people together? What are your thoughts?
As I joked with you even when I came in, I'm like, I think it's a brilliant idea.
Oh, thank you.
Because, you know, I think a lot of times when we sit down over food, and, you know, you and I both have a plate in front of us, and we're kind of eating in between our talking, right?
Yeah.
You connect with each other, I think, a little bit differently than if you and I truly sat here and
in a conference room or something like that.
Yeah. Right. And it felt so, like, professional and awkward and proper and buttoned down.
Yeah.
Right? We're still professional right now, let's be honest. But I think we connect because, you know, in a way, we opened up conversation, right? Just as you asked me about the food I brought and what it meant to me. You know, it connects us. You allowed me in right away. It wasn't about, well, who are you? Right? It became a playing field. Like, okay, this is a great place to start.
Exactly.
So I think it's a brilliant idea.
Oh, thank you. And I'm so glad that you've been here to share your journey and to share your profession and all these great suggestions and ideas that you've given to us. And so we're going to go ahead and get ready to wrap up, but I just want to say one other thing. Again, this Food Coma, Conversations Over Meals in America is brought to you by KeySpot. It's a wonderful app that allows you to share your business, services, events, and all in one key spot. Go to www.keyspotapp.com. And then we also have the book, Yes You Can, 10 Great Ways to Market Your Business. And this book will allow small business owners find great ways and to be able to share their services, their whatever's happening with them and help grow as a business. So again, I want to thank you, Priya, for being my guest today and at Food Coma. And hopefully, listeners, you guys will continue to tune in and share and spread the word about this wonderful podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Find your key to the spot and unlock big savings at Key Spot.